Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. Today is Sunday, October 19th, 2025. Week 8, a great Week 8 just wrapped up. I think I saw every spot in the AP Top 25 changed except for number 1. So lots of movement, lots to talk about. Billy Napier just got fired. Just saw that. So I know we're coming a little later than usual today. I'm glad I waited because now we can report on the Billy Napier stuff. So just me today. Aaron is on a work trip, so all good there. Let's go ahead and dive right into it because there is a lot to talk about. And like I said, a lot of movement in that AP Top 25. But before we get started, please guys, please get subscribed, follow us on the Apple Podcast, on the Spotify podcasts. Our YouTube channel has been growing a lot, so really appreciate it. If you're watching this and maybe you haven't subscribed yet, just go ahead and check. Just subscribe real quick. Obviously, it's free, and it helps our channel, succeed. So moving right into Billy Napier getting fired, it's an end, obviously, to a disappointing era at Florida, we saw it coming era at Florida. Obviously he came from, Louisiana, the school that he was coaching at before, but it just seemed like the SEC grind just didn't really work out for him. Same. I mean, I'm not a coach in the SEC either. Now we're both sitting on the couch watching football from home, except he's getting paid a lot more for it. But in any case, the school announced earlier today, just hours after a not so great win over Mississippi State, they won 23-21 over Mississippi State. But they went ahead and fired him last week I talked about how the reports were out where no matter what kind of happens in this game, it seems like the Billy Napier era was over, and that came true. It culminates a coaching tenure that was marked by, I would say, inconsistent on-field results and mounting frustration for years, really. Napier, he finishes his time in Gainesville with a disappointing 22-23 record across 4 seasons. And this is actually the worst winning percentage by a Florida coach since 1949. So, he arrived in Gainesville with high expectations following that successful run at Louisiana, like I mentioned. But, that skill level just never scaled. The decision-making with, offensive coordination and stuff that may have led to his downfall. But his tenure included a losing record in a demanding SEC, environment. He had a 3-12 record against key rivals such as Georgia, Florida State, LSU, the likes of those teams. This is the fewest wins against rivals by a Florida coach, in forever, probably. And he had an 0-4 record against ranked opponents on the road, which can really kill your fan base when they want to see a good matchup. They get to travel and then they just know you're going to lose every time. So just plagued by the same issues. His tenure this year, especially, just plagued by the same issues that we've seen for years. And, questionable game management, lots of penalties, inconsistency, like I mentioned. The timing of this decision, it comes in a bye week. They play Georgia next week. So it gives them a little time for a wide receivers coach, Billy Gonzalez, who is the interim coach now. Gives them a little time to kind of regroup and figure out a game plan of how they want to attack the Bulldogs next week. But in the meantime, University of Florida, they owe Billy Napier $21 million. I saw that half of it has to be paid within the next month or so. And Florida right now is paying 3 coaches. They are still paying out Dan Mullen, Billy Napier, and now Billy Gonzalez. So not a great spot for Florida, but they have the resources to get it right, and they have the talent pool in the state of Florida to field some good teams. So excited to see what they are able to do from there, but that's a lot of money for sure. So let's talk about the picks that we made in week 8 and how we did. Spoiler alert, Aaron is probably taking a victory lap. That's why he's not here, actually, because he's taking a victory lap because of how many more better picks that he did than he picked than I did. He's clearly got some insight that I don't. But look, in the AP top 10 in the last week, we had number 2 Miami lose, we had number 4 Ole Miss lose, we had number 7 Texas Tech lose, we had number 10 LSU lose, and we'll go one more, number 11 Tennessee also lost. So it's not just me who doesn't have the insight. Clearly, whoever's also doing the polling and voting and stuff, they're clearly also missing something. So Aaron went 7 for 11. I got 4 of 11. Jeez, that's low. All right. So let's dive into a game from Friday night. Louisville took down number 2 Miami Friday night, 24-21. The big story here, obviously, is going to be, Carson Beck's 4 interceptions, which is the most he's ever thrown in a game. That was a surprise to me, hearing that stat. I mean, last year at Georgia, it felt like he threw 4 to 5 interceptions to even begin the game. So how did we get here? How did we get to this point? Let's start with Jeff Brom's Louisville team. They were tricky. They were clutch. They were aggressive. On the opening drive alone, Louisville used a fake reverse and a successful fake field goal on 4th and 4, by the way, to punch in the game's, first score. So they led 14-0 before Miami even knew what hit them. They hadn't been in that position all year. They didn't know how to react to that. I guess, So Miller Moss was clutch. Transfer quarterback from USC. He brought all the offensive knowledge that, he gained with his time, with Lincoln Riley, he brought it up to Louisville, Kentucky. He connected with his top receiver, Chris Bell, for 9 receptions, 136 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You need a star performance like that, to win an upset like this on the road against such a hot team like Miami. And the Miller Moss to Chris Bell connection, really proved that. The defense for Louisville, we've talked ad nauseum on this show about how aggressive Ruben Bain Jr. is a lot on this channel. But the real aggressors in this game on Friday night was Louisville. The Louisville defense came in. Obviously, they had the 4 interceptions, but they came in with the highest pressure rate. They came into this game with the highest pressure rate in FBS with 55%. That sounds like an error. Over half of the drive, or over half of the plays that the Louisville defense is on, they're going to pressure the opposing quarterback. That's impressive, obviously. And then, like I said, that led to a lot of mistakes, a lot of being uncomfortable for Carson Beck, and many of those decisions led to those 4 interceptions. So Jeff Brom, aka the Giant Killer, he has a personal 4-2 record against teams in the AP top 5, going back to his time at Purdue. Some of those actually include, so we had the Louisville-Miami game. He beat the number 2 team, so that was his, kind of highest Giant that he has killed, or number 2 is the highest Giant that he has killed. But when he was at Purdue, 2021, he beat Michigan State. They were number 3 at the time. That was their first loss of the season. Also at Purdue that year, they beat Iowa, who was number 2 that week. They handed Iowa their first loss of the season. And then back in 2018, I remember I was watching this game on TV and texting one of my Ohio State buddies, but he beat number 2 Ohio State, where they were a 13.5-point underdog. So how does he do it? I'm sure he passes out bottles of Michael's secret stuff in the locker room, but other than that, you see the creativity on offense. You see how he tries to out-scheme his opponents. We saw a lot of that. We mixed with the toughness and grittiness and fight you would expect from most football coaches at this level, but you would expect it, but you don't always see it. You don't always see those 3 qualities exuded from certain coaches. So while Miami was high in the ACC rankings and was looking like a clear favorite, they definitely don't control their own destiny anymore. The rest of their schedule looks very manageable. They do have a couple tricky games like against SMU and Syracuse coming up, but I think the big question for me is can this team stay together mentally after a loss like this, especially after when you have one of the best transfer portal classes, that means you have a lot of people that weren't brought up in that team culture. So can be a fragmenting kind of situation. But Carson Beck, I mean, he's been a leader on teams before, but sometimes he has these moments where he maybe throws one of his teammates under the bus, or blames a receiver for running the wrong route and maybe that's what happened, but he could easily just say something like, hey, we had a miscommunication. That's on us for us to fix, and blah, blah, blah. But instead he chooses to say the words that he does, and that can lead to issues in the locker room. So we'll see if that team can stay together after this. It's just one loss. There's a lot ahead of them. I think they're still, win the rest of your games, you're still good for the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there. Let's move forward. Number 14, Oklahoma. They went up to South Carolina, then they won 35-9. This was one of our underdog picks of the week, and man, it gave me stomach aches with how wrong I was. OU was a 5.5 point favorite, I thought, based on the performance that we saw against Texas last week, that there would be some hangover. That there would still be some issues with John Napier's game, considering, his hand injury and how little time he's had to get back from that. But I guess the Sooners took some liquid IV and just got to work. First thing that OU did better this weekend to prove me wrong, their rushing attack came alive outside of just using John Napier. So they had their season average of rush yards in the first half of the game, which is about 120 or so yards. So John Napier was averaging 40, almost 40 of those. So almost a third of all the yards that OU has this season, John Napier has. That's an okay split, I suppose. But against, South Carolina, they ended this game with 171. So way above average of what they've been getting all season. John Napier, he did a pretty decent job passing the ball, considering, again, his hand's condition. I imagine they played it safe. He only had 150 yards and one touchdown through the air. So Oklahoma, they played a good game. Good for them. South Carolina, they did do a lot to make it harder for themselves to win. And I think a lot of that came down to the Lenore Sellers. He put too much on his own shoulders, I think. He ran it for 14 times for -9 yards. To me, that doesn't sound like mostly design runs. That can lead to, if you have a very mobile quarterback like Sellers, yes, design runs can do good things for you. Obviously, having the physical ability to scramble when plays break down. But to me, it just sounds like that was a last-ditch effort a lot, especially considering the 6 sacks. That sounds like not sure what to do. Let me try to make something happen, but just low percentage kind of types of plays. It's worked for him a lot, in the past throughout his career, so I don't blame him for leaning on that. But, in those games where that had worked, he typically wasn't playing an Oklahoma defense, during those games. So his passing game was pretty good in the first half, really fell off in the second. I thought throughout this season, honestly, that we'd see a better connection between, Sellers and Nick Harbor. We saw it in game 1 a lot, and I thought that would just continue, but it wasn't too present yesterday. So with that win, Oklahoma is now 5th in the SEC, and the rest of their schedule is pretty brutal. All of their opponents are ranked. Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, and then LSU. So lots of cannibalization will happen between now and the end of the season. So, my recommendation to them is just focus on one opponent at a time. So the ACC, let's go back to the ACC real quick. I know we talked about Miami earlier. The ACC has really upped the overall talent pool among the league over the last couple of years. We used to just have, Clemson as the tent pole. Maybe that tent pole has been lowered and now it's a little bit more even. I want to focus on number 12, Georgia Tech at Duke. Funny enough, I picked, going into the planning session with Aaron, I picked 3 underdog picks last week. we ended up dropping this one, and ended up picking the USC at Notre Dame, which it was a it was a 9.5-point spread. I picked USC as the underdog, and they lost by 10. So 0-2 on the underdogs for last week. I ended up dropping this one. Georgia Tech was a -3 underdog, and they ended up winning by 3 times that. They won by 9 points. So their 27-18 victory moved them to 7-0 overall and 4-0 in the ACC. This marks the program's first 7-0 start since 1966, and it positions them firmly as a top contender for the ACC championship. This was obviously a very pivotal ACC, battle. Duke, Miami, and Georgia Tech were tied for first. Yellow Jackets, they control their destiny in the conference race here, and I thought, the reason I picked Duke to win this game, I thought Duke's rushing defense, which got them to the top of the ACC in the first place, was going to be able to stop, Haynes King and Georgia Tech. But Duke was able to hold the Yellow Jackets under their season average, but Georgia Tech still got 171 yards, and Haynes King was still the leading rusher with 120 yards and 14 carries. This game was tied going into the fourth, at 10-10. So any mistake either of these teams made at any point can really be pointed to as the reason why the other team won. In this case, despite outgaining Georgia Tech significantly in the first half, I think 238 to 110 yards, Duke failed to capitalize on scoring opportunities, and that ended up being the ultimate difference in the game. You have to punch it in a time like this, especially when you're playing such a quality opponent. You're tied for first in the ACC. You got to punch it in. The most costly play in the first quarter was a fumble at the goal line that Georgia Tech's Omar Daniels returned 95 yards for a touchdown, effectively turning a potential Duke 7-0 lead to a 7-0 deficit. And then Duke was also stopped at the goal line. That was impressive. I think they ended up with a field goal there, but Duke just shot themselves in the foot multiple times. But credit to Georgia Tech for being able to cause that and capitalizing on it. I think Georgia Tech showed a lot of composure and elite execution in the fourth quarter. Obviously, they took over there and was able to score a lot more points than Duke did to close out this tight road game. I think in that fourth quarter, they put together 2 flawless, touchdown drives in the late fourth quarter to secure that win. And Haynes King, again, just final go-ahead touchdown run. This guy does it every time. Build a statue right on North Avenue for Haynes King. I think they have a lot of good things ahead of them by the end of this season. So let's see what else we have on the schedule here. Number 10 LSU Tigers went up to Nashville to play number 17 Diego and the Pavias. I'm just kidding. They played the Vanderbilt Commodores. Vanderbilt won this game 31-24. My question while I was watching this game, is there another group of offensive players that play harder for their quarterback than Vanderbilt has? Like that situation. Like the wide receivers, they throw their body around more than I usually see on any other team. Their running backs run harder. They run angrier. Like this team loves Diego Pavia because of how hard he plays. And then you got to match that energy, I guess, right? Like I never played football, so maybe I don't get the mentality from a personal standpoint, but I get it watching this team. I like the quote Diego Pavia gave at the end of this game: "If we don't have each other 6, we're dead." I might get that tatted on me. That's true teamwork right there. Since World War II, Vanderbilt has never ranked higher than number 10 in the AP poll. They got ranked number 10 earlier today as well. They got number 15 Missouri next. We'll see if they can keep climbing the ranks there and make even more history with this team. But yeah, this team is special. Diego Pavia is special. Vanderbilt's offense was successful, in its strategy of controlling the clock. Not that LSU has the most potent or explosive offense, but it is inconsistent, which we'll get to in a moment. But with inconsistency means some weeks it can really do really well, right? So against a team like that, you want to win that time of possession battle, which they did. 36 minutes to LSU's 23. So the Commodores, they dominated on the ground. They rushed for 239 yards and they averaged 5.3 yards per carry against, the pride and joy of this team is definitely the defense. So they were able to do that against that LSU defense, which was ranked high nationally, but they just struggled to contain Vanderbilt's variety of rushing schemes. Let's go back to Diego Pavia. He was a clear difference maker here. He threw for 160 yards and a touchdown while rushing for 86 yards and 2 more scores. Great game. I'm not saying Vanderbilt's, schedule ahead of them is a gauntlet, although they do end the regular season at Tennessee. But your quarterback being your leading rusher for the season is always a risky bet to make, in my opinion, especially since so much of that offense hinges on him. Moving forward, I'd like to see other running backs be involved more. McKylan Young and Cedric Alexander, they're 2 other running backs. They get a lot of usage, but then the utilization drops off very steeply. As a coach, as a leader on this team, I would want to take the lead. I would want to take the load off your starting quarterback so you can go the distance. They got plenty of running backs on this team. Spread out that usage, in my opinion. But then again, they got to this level because of what Diego does. So maybe continue doing what you're doing. I don't know. What do I know? Vanderbilt to the SEC game is a real possibility, and I think that would just epitomize how crazy the CFB landscape is today. Let's talk about LSU real quick. Their inability to convert in the red zone proved to be the difference maker in this close type of game. It's been a reoccurring issue that head coach Brian Kelly specifically talked about in this post game, and I'm sure he mentioned that while banging, in between banging on tables. But LSU didn't have much trouble moving the ball down the field necessarily. They just couldn't punch it in and had to settle for field goals, much like we talked about Duke earlier, right? So what's the issue with LSU's offense this year? I think most of it probably stems from the offensive line. They can't run block. They have one of the worst rushing attacks, ranked in the 120s in yards per game in the country. This makes it hard to win time of possession battles like we saw in this game. It's hard to win that time of possession battle and control the game on their terms. One-dimensional offenses hardly ever do well once competition starts ramping up, and their passing attack is, I mentioned again before, like inconsistent at best. Nussmeier, I know he dealt with some secret injuries beforehand, but he struggled with accuracy and confidence at times. He often misses throws or tries to force the ball where it doesn't need to go. It's led to a less explosive and efficient attack than expected for a team that has LSU's, receiving talent. Looking ahead, LSU has Texas A&M and at Alabama next. It's going to be a rough couple weeks. 4 SEC losses is definitely a possibility for this LSU team. We'll cover the Texas A&M LSU preview in our next episode, but in between then, hopefully Brian Kelly hasn't broken any more tables. Moving right along, a real nail-biter in Athens, Georgia. Number 5, Ole Miss lost to number 9, UGA. Technically, this gives UGA an upset victory, which we haven't heard that in a while, mainly because UGA has been the higher-ranked teams against everyone they've played, basically the last 4 years or so. UGA won 43-35. Couple things about this UGA team. Saturday's performance on offense, probably a top 3 offensive performance I've ever seen from this, program. Maybe 2022 Oregon and TCU that same season were better, but this is definitely the worst defensive squad I've ever seen for UGA. It took all the way until the fourth quarter to get a third down stop. I understand Trinidad Chambliss is very talented. He showcased that multiple times through the first three quarters. I just don't get why UGA defense and Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart and all the bright minds that they have on defense don't pressure the opponent's quarterback. They have the dudes for it. I don't know. I don't get why it doesn't happen. They did it in the end, in the fourth quarter. And guess what happened? A bunch of ground balls, a bunch of missed passes. Ole Miss had 3 possessions. 2 ended on punts. 1 ended on downs. And they had 13 total yards in the fourth quarter. Amazing what you can do when you pressure the quarterback. On the other quarterback, not Trinidad Chambliss, but Gunnar Stockton, he's a gamer. I've heard other people call him that. That's the only word that encapsulates what he's been able to do for this team. He just does what's necessary to win. He does what's necessary for his teammates to succeed. He had 289 yards. Excuse me. He had 289 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. UGA did not punt the ball one time this game. They scored points, whether a field goal or a touchdown, on every possession that they had during this game. UGA outscored Ole Miss 17-0 in the fourth quarter. Stockton does have issues, don't get me wrong. In my opinion, it's either with confidence or QB vision, but there's been multiple times in multiple games where there's plenty of receivers that are open, and he either takes off running or doesn't see them or whatever else. I think a lot of that has to do with him being overly risk averse after seeing what happened with Carson Beck last year. But this Georgia team, they can win because of Gunnar and not in spite of him. Okay, I know there was a lot of talk before the season. Gunnar Stockton, how is he going to compare to Carson Beck? Can this team, based on his Notre Dame performance, is he going to be a liability? No, this guy's an asset. Past Georgia teams, they weren't necessarily built for shootouts. This 2025 version of it, they can hang with the best of them. Ole Miss being one of the best of them. Tennessee being one of the best of them. By the way, I need some water. Ugh. Talking on your own when there's no other host, thirsty business. By the way, did you see Lawson Lucky's 3 receiving touchdowns? I thought it was Brock Bowers out there. Everyone complains about Mike Bobo, his play calling, and not using tight ends enough. You're not watching football. These are non-ball knowers complaining about this stuff. So, looking at Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, you got 1 loss. Not the end of the world. You have a very favorable schedule ahead of you if you could bounce back against Oklahoma in Week 9. I think that game will be very good. In the current SEC landscape, I don't know who controls their destiny, but Ole Miss is in a very good spot. UGA has a bye week, and then they have Florida in Jacksonville next week. I think they can win the rest of their games. Will they? I mean, that depends on if the defense wants to play that day. I mean, the first 3 quarters of this Ole Miss game, they were just out there doing cardio. You might as well just let them score, right? At the end of their season, they play Georgia Tech every week 12. They look really good. Can you imagine a top 5 matchup between Georgia Tech and UGA? Atlanta might split in half, like a black hole in the middle of the sea, if we get a top 5 matchup between those 2 teams. All right, last game of the week that I want to cover. Number 11, Tennessee Volunteers got their second loss last night to an ascending number 6, Alabama Crimson Tide. Final score 37-20. That 99-yard pick 6 to end the first half. If you didn't feel something when Zabian Brown cleared that last Tennessee player, you must have a lot of free time on Saturdays in the fall. Being such a casual fan. But just kidding. How did we get here? Alabama's defense led the way, which is crazy to say, for a Kalen DeBoer-led team, very offensive-minded individual, but the defense showed up to play against a very good Tennessee offense. Obviously, you had that pick six. They sacked Aguilar 4 times, and they also held Tennessee under their rushing average for the year, which rushing, key part to Heupel's offensive system. Yes, you see the explosive passes a lot, but it's because of those great rushing attacks that those even become available. On the offensive side for Alabama, Ryan Williams came alive. I know he's dealing with injuries, but having him back as a legit option really helps Ty Simpson a lot. They have a solid, 1, 2, 3 punch with Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Brooks now. And I think that's going to do wonders for them in the final stretch of the season. I will say, though, their rushing attack is still a little suspect. Jam Miller couldn't get much going this game, and their leading rusher was actually Jeremy Bernard on a bunch of, tricky end-around plays and stuff like that. But while they have gotten through their meat of their schedule with only that one loss at the beginning of the season, I think that needs to be something that they need to shore up somehow if they want to make a deep run in the playoffs. There's going to be a lot more talented teams. I know they're kind of maybe entering into a quote unquote easier part of their schedule, but it's going to ramp up real fast, near the end of the year. So Tennessee did a lot of things well in this game, but ultimately came up short in a lot of categories as well. Obviously, I thought their passing game looked great and explosive at times. Although a lot of the yards that they gained, came during a time in the game when it was already kind of put away. Deshaun Bishop, solid running back performance. I know, Tennessee didn't get up to their average yards per game that they usually get, but he was a bright spot, and definitely continue to lean on him to open up those explosive passing plays for Joey Aguilar. To go back to that pick six, that seemed to culminate an entire first half that was full of penalties and mistakes that were plaguing the Tennessee offense. This Alabama team, though, very impressive, top to bottom. Outside of that fluke game one, you had a first-time starter quarterback on the road in Tallahassee. This team looks very solid and should be a favorite to win a natty. Not mad at anyone picking them to win it. They have weapons everywhere, and they have a good quarterback that knows how to manage the game and his teammates really well. So Alabama and Texas A&M are the top 2 spots in the SEC right now. I went ahead and sprinkled a little money on Alabama to win the SEC. So we'll see how that goes. So that's it for today's show. Tried to keep it brief, but there was just so much content to go through. We'll come back with Week 9 predictions later on this week. Good games there, and I'm sure more chaos will follow. So appreciate you guys watching. We will catch you next time. Thanks.